That sick calf, I think he's probably about 70% better. I would say, there's like a 90% chance that he survives. I mean, unless, I would say that he's actually about 70% better. And the thing about that calf is that it seems like his appetite's getting better every single day that goes by. I'm noticing that he eats more and more food, and I can actually visibly tell that he is getting a little bit fatter. All right, because the whole thing is that I can't have him getting any thinner, because if he gets any thinner, I mean, he's already practically bones. One of these when I get a chance, I'll go over there and I'll take a maybe I'll take a little video of him and I'll show you what he looks like. But he is extremely emaciated. But I would say that he's doing better he's doing better. All right, he is doing better. He's eating more food. He's eating more food, and he's not gasping for air anymore. And so I would say that there's a 90% chance that he survives. And I would say that he's about 70% better. But he was sick for so long that he has effectively become a skeleton. All right, he is better, but he is very emaciated. But the good thing is that his appetite is definitely getting better. I am noticing that he is eating substantially more food. All right, yesterday I was like, oh, he's actually eating a good bit of food. The day before I was like, he's starting to eat. And today he's actually eating quite a bit. He's actually eating enough to really get himself going. And so that's very good. And, so I've decided that, the 7th of next month, the 7th of July is when I will probably, that's more or less when I am considering liquidating animals. All right, the 7th of July. And here, the whole thing, and I've described my situation in thorough detail, right? In terms of a realistic sense, I am effectively starting to generate such a drastic amount of money. And, and I sat there and I thought about it. And I determined, what should I do with this? Because here's the thing. If I took the money that I was making in this business and I just reinvested the money until the end of the year, right, for the next 5.5 months, if I just reinvested the money, I would effectively have enough money from just taking the money that I make in my business and putting it back into my business. I would effectively make enough money to buy about 150 to 200 cattle. All right, just by the end of this year. All right, and that would be with zero leverage. If I just took the money that I was making and put it back into my business for the rest of the year, and I didn't use any leverage, I would still have to buy about 150 to 200 cattle. All right, and I understand what is happening. I have taken a look at it, and I have, more or less the thing. Okay, so what I have determined is that I will continue to focus on growing my business. And if along the way I feel like buying anything, I can just buy it. That's effectively that's because there is no reason for me to go out of my way to spend money. All right, like, how do I even spend this amount of money, right? I legitimately make so much money in the cattle business that I effectively made more money than anybody on the planet by a long shot. All right, that's effectively how much money I made. I effectively made enough money to where I don't have to worry about money anymore. If I legitimately just took the money that I was making in this business and I put it back into the business, I would legitimately have to purchase about 150 to 200 cattle by the end of the year, and I would not be using any more leverage at all. Legitimately zero more leverage. I would have the leverage that I have on my balance sheet right now, and I would, whatever. I would still have to purchase 150 to 200 cattle. And the leverage that I have on my balance sheet does not matter when I expand my balance sheet, because when I expand my balance sheet, if I triple to quadruple the number of animals that I have, those animals will also continue to go up in value, and the the unrealized gain. Effectively, if I triple to quadruple the size of my balance sheet, the unrealized gain itself will be effectively the debt. All right, so effectively the debt does not matter. All right, and the whole thing about it is if I enter a situation where my balance sheet is starting to get over 70% leverage, I will legitimately say it, right? I will say it. I said it, right? Like, a couple weeks ago, I said my balance sheet is at about 70 to 75% leveraged, right? I said that, right? My balance sheet right now is about 70 to 75% leveraged. I'm not going to take any more debt. If I am going to take more debt, how would I do it? Right? I would realize some of my gains, expand my balance sheet, stabilize my assets, then leverage against it. Right? That I said that word for word, right? A couple of weeks ago, maybe about a week ago, maybe about 2 weeks ago. I legitimately said that word for word. Effectively word for word, right? I am at 70 to 75% leveraged. I do have a large amount of positive equity. If I am going to take more debt, the way that I would do that is to realize some of my gains, reinvest the capital, expand my balance sheet, stabilize my assets, then leverage against my balance sheet. Right? But am I going to do that right now? No, I'm not. Why am I not going to do that? Because it is about to get blazing hot here in about a month. All right, when the hot months are over, then I will re-leverage. Right? That's the whole thing. That's legitimately the big idea plan, right? And when I take a look at my situation, I understand, all right? Like, I've taken a look at it. I understand what is happening. I legitimately make more money on my backyard farming commercial cattle than anybody on the planet makes doing just about anything, and it is by a massive margin. Legitimately, I'm not lying about it. I am legitimately, it is what it is, right? And you have to understand that, I'm not bragging about it. I'm just saying, that's effectively what is happening. I legitimately made so much money in my backyard farming commercial cattle that I legitimately made more money than everybody on the planet. All right, and it just is what it is. All right, and I say, but effectively over the next I got 3 weeks, right? I got 3 weeks and 2 days. I'll be liquidating my animal starting July 7th. Okay, that's the first Monday of July. I will start liquidating my animals then, and but that's the whole thing. It just is what it is. All right, I don't know how else to put it. I effectively, made enough money to walk off into the sunset for the rest of my life. And here's the thing: I would bet that I actually make closer to 50,000 than 30,000. Right? Yesterday, I was saying that if I legitimately take a look at it for what it is, I would anticipate that I make more than 30 grand, right? And then I said I would make substantially more than 30 grand, and I may even make 50. I might even make 50. All right, I legitimately might even make 50 grand in the next month. All right, it's going to be more than 30. It probably won't be 50. It'll probably be a little bit less. But it might be 50. It might even be a little bit more than 50. I'm not, more or less, I will make a drastic amount of money. And here's the thing. Let's say that I go and I make myself 45 grand, right? I will legitimately take that money and I will make more money with it. That's the whole thing. I'm not going to go, oh my God, I'm making 50 grand a month. Let me go and buy myself 3 Lamborghinis. I'm not going to do that, right? I've talked about this. That's borderline ridiculous. All right, the whole thing about money is like, if and I feel like this idea is pushed a lot, and it's not a very, in terms of my belief system, I don't see it as a very good idea. Oh my God, now that I have money, I can go and spend it. That's not exactly a reasonable thing to do with money. Invest the capital into something that makes a positive return. right? And then, that's more important than spending money. All right, I'm not going to go, oh my God, I'm making whatever 40, 50 grand a month. Let me go and buy myself a Lamborghini. I'm not going to do that. What am I going to do with the capital? Am I going to buy myself a bigger house? Am I going to buy myself a better car? No, I'm not. And I'm just saying that this is what I am going to do. All right, I am clearly indicating exactly what I will do with the money. All right, I understand that I am making a massive amount of money. All right, I understand that I am. And what am I going to do with the money? Grow my business with it. All right, that's what I will do. By the end of the year, I would anticipate that I more than double the size of my business. I will legitimately take the money and I will make more money with it. That is what I will do. All right. And the whole thing about it, and I have told myself that if I want to buy anything, that I should just buy it. Because, I'm not going to go out of my way to buy things. I'm not going to go out of my way to buy anything, all right? But if I feel like buying something while I am doing something, I can just buy it. It doesn't matter. All right, I can just buy it. I don't have to think about it. It's not even a good idea. Well, I mean, for me, it's borderline a waste of time to think about spending money. It's borderline a waste of time. All right, if I want to buy it, I just buy it. All right, if I want to buy it, I just buy it. It's borderline a waste of time to think about spending money. In terms of what do I think about, the only thing that I think about when it comes to money is where to invest my capital. All right, that's it. And I would bet, more or less, and I may actually end up doing better than I thought. I may actually end up doing better than I anticipate, but I will more or less double the size of my business over the next 5.5 months. All right, I will double the size of my business over the next 5.5 months. All right, and as of today, already, in the next 30 days, I would anticipate that I make over 30, substantially more than 30 grand in just the next 30 days. I will make substantially more than $30,000 in just the next 30 days. And I would actually reasonably anticipate that I more than double the size of my business by the end of the year. I will legitimately take that money, invest the money, and grow my business with it. I would be willing to bet. All right, that's the direction that I'm going. I have taken a look at it. I understand what is happening. I effectively made more money farming cattle in my backyard, starting myself a cattle business, than anybody on the planet makes doing anything. And it's by a massive margin. I legitimately make enough money to where I don't worry about money anymore. I'm not saying I've abandoned my responsibilities. Right? Because I'm not saying like, oh my God, I've put myself in some unrecoverable situation and now I don't worry about money. I'm saying I legitimately make such a large amount of money that I don't worry about money anymore. Legitimately. And I'm not bragging about it. I'm just telling you that it is what it is. I legitimately make such a large amount of money farming cattle in my backyard that I don't even worry about money anymore. And the whole thing about this is like, and I've been speaking about this for the last couple of days. If why would I give up the cattle business, right? Why would I stop the cattle business when I legitimately make hundreds of thousands of dollars a year in my backyard, right? Why would I give up the cattle business, right? I legitimately make hundreds of thousands of dollars a year doing this. And in all honesty, if I sat in my backyard for the rest of my life, if I legitimately felt like sitting here on a 10.5 acre field for the rest of my life and running cattle like this forever, I would still make enough money to do anything on the entire planet. I would still not have to worry about money forever. I could legitimately still buy anything on the entire planet, short of like a yacht, a private jet, short of anything like that, short of like drugs, alcohol. I could legitimately buy anything. right? I mean, and I've spoken about this. If I legitimately felt like sitting here on a 10.5 acre field for the rest of my life and farming cattle forever, I could do that. And I still, at that point, would not have to worry about money forever. Right? And even if I felt like exiting the cattle business, if I said, you know what, I just don't want to do this anymore, right? I don't want to, I don't want to be in the cattle business anymore. All right, I just want to liquidate all of my assets, put all the money in the S&P 500 and just go and work a job. All right, that's what I want to do, right? I just want to go and work a job. Even then, I would still make more money than what I ever would need. Granted that the S&P 500 produced me an 8% return a year. And the whole thing, and I've been talking about this, the whole idea of a house is not a good investment. All right, and and I will go through this idea. From what I have seen. And why would I prefer to put money in the S&P 500 than a house? There are a few exceptions. All right, there are a few exceptions to that. And the whole thing about a property is that the benefit of a property is that if you go to the bank and you take your money and you leverage it 5 to 1. Let's say you put a 20% down payment on a house and then the bank gives you the other 80%, right? If you do that, let's say that you have 100 grand, right? Let's say that you have 100 grand and you go to the bank and you have a $400,000 house that you want to buy. And so you leverage 300,000 of it and you buy yourself a $400,000 house and it appreciates by 3% a year and you're only in it for 100 grand. So your 400 grand or your $400,000 house will appreciate by 3% a year. And this would be under ideal situations. All right. You have to account for property tax. You have to account for, there will be damages, right? You will have to fix your house. You will have to pay for the electricity. You'll have to pay for the gas. You'll have to pay for the insurance, right? I mean, your house is not going to appreciate 3% a year. If anything, it's going to appreciate 0 when you consider the costs. But let's just say, theoretical situation, and this is also what I mean by houses are not good assets. If I did not have my cattle farm, if I was not looking to become a farmer, I would not even buy a house. All right, I wouldn't have bought this house if I was not looking to become a farmer. The whole thing about me buying this farm and me buying myself a place to live on this farm was so that I could use it as a farm and make money as a farmer. And here's the whole idea of a house. In terms of a realistic sense, the appreciation value of a house is effectively 0% when you account for the fact that you'll have to pay for all of these various things. You'll have to pay for your insurance. You'll have to pay for your whatever, right? You'll have to pay for your property tax. You'll have to pay for your light bill. You'll have to pay for your gas. Something will go, something in your house will break and you'll have to fix it. All right, and in terms of a realistic sense, the appreciation value of a house is 0%. In terms of the major consideration, like if I were to legitimately buy a house, when would I do it? I would do it when I could produce cash flow with the property. And a very good example of this is, let's say I go and I find myself a fourplex. Let's say that I have 100 grand and I go and I find myself a fourplex. And this fourplex has not been updated in 20 years. The owner has not raised the rent in 10 years. It's kind of run down and there's one vacancy. Right? And the owner wants 400 grand for it. Right? The owner wants 400 grand for it. And then you take a look at this property and you have determined that if you put $100,000 into this property, that you can effectively fix it up. The valuation of and you can raise the rents and you can fill the vacancy. And when you do that, the value of the fourplex will go to 750 grand. So you'll be all in, you'll be all in, whatever, right? you'll buy the property for 400 grand. You'll put $100,000 down. You'll put $100,000 into fixing it, and by the time you fixed it, you will also fill the vacancy, and then the value of the property will go up to 750, and you will raise the rents. Then and you could even go and live in one of the fourplexes, and you won't even have to worry about paying for it, right? Something like that. At that point, and I wouldn't even buy a fourplex, all right? In terms of like rental units, the only thing that really makes sense in terms of a rental unit is a large scale rental unit, like at least 30 units, all right? If a 30 unit building, something like that. But houses are not good investments, because okay, let's say that you have money and you buy a house, right? And you buy a house, so let's just say you even buy the whole thing. You just pay the whole 400 grand for it. And if that thing, in terms of a realistic sense, the appreciation value of the house will be 0%. In all honesty, it will be 0%, because you have to account for property tax. You have to account for damages. You have to account for your bills, your insurance, right? You have to account for these things. And if you took that same money and you put it in the S&P 500, you would, effectively on the average make about 8% a year. You wouldn't have any damages. You wouldn't have any property tax, right? You wouldn't have, A, B, C, D, X, Y, Z. You would just be holding on to the S&P 500. And if the S&P 500, and I've been using this as a realistic example because this is legitimately one of the things that I could do. If I legitimately felt like not running a business anymore, I said, you know what? I don't want to run a business anymore. Right? That's what I have determined. I'm not going to run a business anymore. If I decided to do that, I could liquidate all of my assets, put the money in the S&P 500, go work a job, and I would still never run out of money for the rest of my life. Legitimately, I could do anything on the entire planet still. It doesn't matter. All right, and so here's the thing. If let's say that I do this, let's use my situation as an example. Let's say I take whatever, right? Let's say I take my $1.5 million. Let's say I take whatever, my million, let's just say it's $1.5 million. So let's say I take $1.5 million and I put it in the S&P 500 and I make whatever, an 8% return on this money. That would be $12,000 a month, right? That $12,000 a month would be an unrealized gain. It would be unrealized. Same thing as my cattle, right? The whole idea of an unrealized gain is that when and this is why I put such an emphasis on this idea of understanding what an unrealized gain is, because unrealized gains are not taxed until you pay yourself, until you realize the gains, they are not taxed. All right, so when you have an asset and that asset goes up in value, that value gain is called an unrealized gain. And you don't pay taxes on it unless you liquidate and you realize those gains. So let's say that I make whatever. Let's just say it's whatever. Let's say it's $1 million. And so I'm making $80,000 a year appreciation on my S&P 500, right? Let's say that I make whatever, $80,000 a year on the S&P 500. It's an unrealized gain. And I go and I fry chicken at Wingstop for $15 an hour. So I go and I fry chicken at Wingstop for let's say $2,500 a month. So $2,500 a month is what my income would be, and I would have an additional $8,000 a month of an unrealized gain. That $8,000 a month, whatever I need out of that money, I could pay myself. And then the rest of it would sit in my investment portfolio. Let's say that at the end of the month, let's say I make $2,500 and I have determined that I need $4,000. Let's say that I need an extra $1,500. Well, I can pay myself the $1,500 out of my investment portfolio, and my investment portfolio would still have grown by 6.5%. That's, that's effectively the situation, that it is what it is. The amount of money that I have invested would actually grow on its own, and I can pay myself whatever I needed. All right, because when you have money in an investment, and this is a very important idea, when you have money in an investment, when the investment goes up in value, all right, when the investment goes up in value, that value is called an unrealized gain. It's called an unrealized gain. You don't pay taxes on unrealized gains. This is legitimately how the rich people make money. I am telling you, this is how I make my money. All right, like when you take a look at, I effectively do better. I'm not bragging about it. I'm just saying it is what it is. When it comes to money, I legitimately managed to make more money than effectively everybody on the entire planet. Legitimately, starting myself a cattle business in my backyard. I actually did it, right? I'm not making it up. Does my business look fake? Right? Like, if you're going to be poor, then go and be poor by yourself. All right, it's kind of pathetic. All right, how do you end up in a situation where, it's like if you're legitimately still going the wrong way? How are you going the wrong way? I legitimately sit here and show you exactly how I do it, right? And this is also, one of those things that legitimately just blows my mind. It's like, at least try. And I've spoken about this, like when I give you my information, I am legitimately giving away the best information that I can. I'm not giving you wrong information. The whole thing about it is that if you want to double check it, then go and double check it. But understand that I am not like giving you which would be fantastic. Go and double check it. That's fantastic. But understand that I am not giving you the wrong information. Maybe, maybe there are details or whatever that you can, oh my God, well, turns out that if you feed the animals a 68%, right? If you feed the animals a 73% TDN diet, then they'll put on an extra quarter pound a day. If it's something like that, then sure, right? But I legitimately sit here and give you the best information that I can, and I legitimately, at the end of the day, I actually did it. Right? Like I actually did it. And I've spoken about this all the time. The whole thing is that like I'm not like a malicious person. I'm not like sitting here giving you the wrong info. I'm not sitting here telling you the wrong thing. All right, like, I've even told you where I read my books. If you want to go on the website and read the books for yourself and double check what I am telling you, then go and do it. That's very good, right? Sometimes I'll even post the book that I read. I'll even post it. And I will tell you this is exactly what I'm reading. Right? And if you want to go and read it for yourself, then go and read it for yourself. Which is fantastic. That's wonderful. You should go out and find your own information. A lot of it, because I cannot sit here, because if I read 7 books a day, all right, if I legitimately read, 20 books in a week, how would I post all of that? Right? I mean, and this is also, you're going to have to go out and find your own information. All right. And I told you exactly where I find my information, and it's free. All right, and I'm not saying just go and read a bunch of books, but understand that, you're going to have to put in the work too, all right? The books, at the end of the day, if you don't go out and actually do it, it doesn't matter. And I've spoken about this. The whole idea is like, me, if you want to know what it was like to legitimately go and run 200 cattle, and here's the thing, I will probably run closer to 300 or 400 cattle by the end of the year. I'm already at 90, right? I will probably end up running closer to 300 to 400, like 350 cattle for the year. And if you want to know what it was like to go and run 350 cattle by yourself, if you want to know what that feels like, then go and do it. Because at the end of the day, it is what it is. I actually did it. And if you want to see what it was like, then go and do it. All right, that's fair, right? Because I actually did it. All right, and I have effectively entered a situation, and I've taken a look at it, and the best way for me to describe this is that I legitimately make enough money to buy anything on the entire planet. Legitimately, and the whole, but the whole, going back to the whole idea of homes are not good investments. They're not good investments. All right, I would rather have the S&P 500 before I had a house, and that's a very realistic reason why. Because let's say that let's just say that I said I didn't want to be in the cattle business anymore. Let's say I didn't want to be in the cattle business anymore, and so I liquidated all of my assets, and I just put all of the money in the S&P 500, and let's say it was $1 million. And so I have $1 million in the S&P 500, and whatever, right? I got an 8% return a year. I went and I fried chicken at Wingstop, and I made a whatever, right? I fried French fries at In-N-Out and made $20 an hour or whatever, right? And whatever, I made like $3,000 a month. So I have a $3,000 a month income, right? Let's say I have $3,000 a month, and let's just say my income is $3,000 a month. All right, so if my income is $3,000 a month and I need $4,000, and my S&P 500 is making whatever $7,000, $8,000 a month, $7,000 a month, I can just liquidate a portion of my stock portfolio, pay myself the money, and then leave the rest of the money in my investment account, and that money will legitimately, it will be an unrealized gain. I don't have to pay taxes on any of it. Right? Like if you have a stock portfolio, and let's say that, whatever, right? And it goes up by, and I don't like using my money because I feel like, I feel like when I use, and the whole thing about this is like, I don't know how else to put it other than, I actually worked for it, right? I actually worked for it, and it's like, oh my God, it's inconsiderate. It's not inconsiderate. All right. It's not inconsiderate. I don't know how else to, it is what it is. I actually worked for it. I actually made it. All right, if you want to know what it was like to go and start yourself a business in your backyard running commercial cattle and make $500,000 a year, if you want to know what that felt like, if you want to know what it felt like to make $350,000, $500,000 on a backyard by yourself running commercial cattle, then go and do it. All right, it's not inconsiderate. I actually did it. Right, and if anything, the whole thing about my situation is that I encourage other people to go and do it too, right? Why not? Like, why not? Right? And I legitimately show you how I did it, and I legitimately give you my details. I show you how I did it. So why not go and do it for yourself? Why not? Right? And I've already spoken about this. The whole idea of this is, and here's something that, I guess it's kind of like whatever, a hot take or whatever, but you have to understand that I legitimately, I live in a world where I legitimately, in terms of everything that I have looked at and everything that I have seen, I genuinely do not know anybody even doing 10%. This whole idea of, because sometimes you'll hear this like, oh my God, if you just whatever, right? If you just, people will find, but here's the thing. I legitimately do not know anybody even doing 10%. 10%. I legitimately don't even know anybody doing 10%, and that to me is borderline. Like, I don't know why. I don't know, whatever. That's not good. Because if you're average, if you are legitimately average, you have it in yourself to learn how to do 95% of this, maybe even 105%. You might even be able to do better if you put in the effort and you actually went and put in the work. All right, you have to understand that I legitimately don't know anybody even doing 10%. All right, if you want to know what it was like to go and run 200 cattle by yourself, start yourself a cattle business and run 200 cattle by yourself, if you want to know what that felt like, then go and do it. All right? See if you can even do 10%. Then talk whatever, right? Then you can talk trash. The whole thing, I legitimately don't even know anybody even doing 10%. I legitimately managed to make myself enough money to do anything on the entire planet. I could legitimately walk off into the sunset. And I would effectively never run out of money for my entire life. What have I decided to do with the money? I will grow my business. All right, that is what I have decided. All right, I'm not going to walk off into the sunset. I'm not going to do this forever. I will legitimately grow my business. All right, I will take the money that I am making and I will grow my business with it. But that's the situation that I'm in. All right, and but why would I give up the cattle business, right? Why would I quit the cattle business? You have to understand that I legitimately make hundreds of thousands of dollars a year doing this. Why would I quit the cattle business, right? I would even bet that I may even make 50 grand in the next 30 days. All right, it'll be somewhere between 40 and 50 grand in the next 30 days. And guess what? When I make money, I legitimately take that money and I invest it, and then I make more money with it. All right, why would I quit the cattle business? This business legitimately makes me hundreds of thousands of dollars a year. Why would I quit the cattle business? If I felt like quitting the cattle business, I could legitimately just liquidate my assets, put all of the money in the S&P 500 and go fry chicken at Wingstop, and I would never worry about money again. All right, and at the end of the day, it just is. Well, I actually did it. All right, nobody cares. I mean, opinions don't matter. All right, opinions don't matter. The whole thing about this is like, if you want to, I'm being completely. And here's the thing, by the end of this year, I'll actually probably have ran closer to 350 cattle for the year, maybe 250, 350, something like that. If you want to know what it was like to go and run, even right now, I'm effectively just about at 100, right? 90 cattle. If you want to know what it was like to go and run whatever, 150, 200 cattle a year by yourself, starting yourself a cattle business, if you want to know what that felt like, then go and do it, all right? Go and do it. Nobody cares about an opinion, all right? All right, because you have to understand that, in terms of what I have seen, like farming is one of those things where it's a hard skill. Either you can do it or you can't. And if you can't, you suck. Legitimately, you will legitimately do so poorly, it will be borderline pathetic. That's what's going to happen. And I know that that's not exactly politically correct. That's not exactly politically correct, but you have to understand that the world is not Disneyland, all right? If you suck, then, if you are legitimately, if you can't do it, then you suck. Legitimately, your results will be horrible. It'll be borderline pathetic. That's what's going to happen. Farming is not one of these things that you just magically start doing one day. And if you actually want to learn how to do something like this, you have to understand that it is going to be it's going to take a long time. It's going to take a long time. It's going to take a lot of effort. It's not something that you just magically pick up one day and start doing, all right? Nobody was born to be a farmer. You're legitimately going to have to spend a lot of time and a lot of effort to learn how to do this. Or if you don't, and you legitimately go out to do it, what will happen is you will suck, number one. Your results will be borderline pitiful, and it'll be kind of pathetic. All right, so, and you have to learn how to do this stuff, all right? You have to learn how to do this stuff. If you legitimately want to become a farmer, you're going to have to learn how to do it. It's not impossible, right? It's not impossible. It just takes a long time and it takes a lot of effort. All right, I actually managed to do it. I legitimately, here's the thing. I will legitimately make over 30 grand in the next 30 days. I may even make closer to 50 grand in just the next 30 days. I would actually anticipate that I more than double the size of my business over the next year, over the next 6 months, excuse me, over the rest of the year. I will more than double the size of my business over the next 5 to 6 months. Just by taking the money that I make in my business and putting it back into my business. All right, you know, why would I quit farming, right? I mean, that's the whole thing. It's like, why would I quit farming? You know, I legitimately make hundreds of thousands of dollars a year in my backyard right now today. Why would I quit farming? I may legitimately be the best in the world at it. One of the best in the world. I may legitimately be the only person on the entire planet that can do something like this. Not can, but does, right? That's the whole thing. I may be the only person on the entire planet that does do something like this. I legitimately make hundreds of thousands of dollars a year in my backyard running these commercial cattle, all right? And that's it for me today, YouTube. You have a good one.